Hey everybody, welcome to the new normal and a little bit of story time for us, the grown-ups, the ones who are holding it together, for everyone and everything, holding it down all day long. And at the end of the day, I thought it would be nice to have someone read to you and tell you a story. So tonight I'm going to be reading from Tell Me a Story. It's my very first book. I wrote it when I was pregnant with Avery. And so I picked some selections tonight that are a little bit about neighbors. And because I think we're all seeing a lot more of our neighbors right now here in whatever we're calling this. It's not quarantine, it's lockdown, stay at home. Okay, so the first one is The Magpie. In a meadow lived a magpie. From his perch he could see every creature that moved beneath. The magpie collected bits of things that it kept tucked away in its nest. The magpie believed that the meadow belonged to him, and everyone and everything that crossed beneath his tree was truly beneath him. All the creatures in the meadow knew the magpie. They were very careful to say only things that that bird liked to hear, and they did whatever he told them to do. This was because the magpie had a terrible temper and would often pelt those he did not like with hard, sharp things that he had stored up in his nest. All the animals knew better than to cross the magpie, and it came to pass that a small field mouse took up residence in the hollow of the tree's roots. The mouse said a cheerful "morning" to the bird every day. Each day the mouse offered to share some of the things that he'd collected with the bird. Magpie was so furious at the appearance of this cheerful little intruder that at first he didn't even speak to the mouse. Then he recovered himself and began pelting the mouse with bits of things in an effort to get him to leave. On the first day, the bird dropped twigs and branches down on the mouse, but the mouse very happily took them all, gathered up the twigs, and took them inside his burrow. On the second day, the bird threw acorns and hard nuts down on the mouse, often leaving him red with welts and bruises. But Mouse collected the things, and he took those inside too. On the third day, the magpie was really just seething with hatred for this mouse. How dare he invade Magpie's territory and then ignore the bird's best efforts to drive him away? The bird waited for the mouse to leave the hole, and then he rained a collection of stones right down on him. Well, after licking his wounds, the mouse hauled the stones into his burrow. On the fourth day, Mouse was out in the field, and he spotted a boy standing by the tree, and the boy was laughing, and he was standing over the magpie. He had felled the bird with his slingshot and was preparing to crush it beneath his boot. But quick as a flash, Mouse ran to the boy and bit him hard on the ankle. The boy shrieked, dropped his weapon, and he ran home crying. Mouse scurried over to Magpie and began to smooth the bird's ruffled feathers. Then he went inside, and he brought out bits of cloth and some of the sticks that the bird had used to pelt him with, and he fashioned a stretcher. He placed Magpie on the stretcher, and he pulled him into his burrow, where he nursed him back to health by feeding him acorn broth by a twig fire. And he served the broth in a stone bowl. It took nearly a week before Magpie was well enough to speak, but he could not believe that it was the mouse who had saved him. When he could finally talk, the bird said, Why? After the way I treated you, why would you save me?" Mouse looked truly shocked at the bird's words. He said, "Why? After all the kindness that you've shown me? How could I do otherwise? Kindness? Gasped the magpie. He did not say more because he was suddenly ashamed of what his real intentions had been. Well, you gave me twigs for my fire and branches to build my furniture, the mouse said, and you gave me enough acorns and nuts to feed me through the whole winter. And those stones you gave me, well, you gave me enough of those stones to make these fine bowls. Oh, well, true, your aim was often poor, but how could I be angry with so generous a neighbor? From that day on, Magpie became truly generous to Mouse and all the other animals in the meadow. He flew far and wide, collecting bits to share with them. Only now, he was sure to give those offerings gently, and he never again cast a stone at his neighbor. That's just after a brief experience on next door. Just saying, seemed relevant. Here's another neighborly one. It's called The Twisted Tree. And it's about, it was based on a wisteria tree, a huge ancient wisteria tree that we had in New Jersey. Not sure if they're really a tree or just a giant vine. In a garden, surrounded by tall pine trees, fell a little fuzzy green seed pod. It was a beautiful bright green, pointed at both ends, and it was soft as velvet. The pod landed on a clear patch of dirt between two trees. One was a brash young cedar, the other a thin pine. As the days and weeks passed, the wind blew and stirred the dirt which covered the pod. Rain fell on the pod, and later the sun shone down and warmed it. From the pod grew long, velvety green shoots that stretched high up into the air. When the wind blew, the strands twisted together and wound around each other like an emerald rope. Years passed, and the shoots grew up into thick brown branches and touched the two trees. The body of the tree was twisted like a corkscrew, but the arms grew long and straight, and they reached out to hold the two trees on either side. The cedar and the pine had never seen anything like the twisted tree, and they began to argue about it. Cedar was worried about the way it was clinging to them. "It could choke us," he said. "It could overshadow us and make us wither and die." Pine said, "Don't be so silly. The way it hugs me makes me feel loved. I like the way it supports us and binds us together with each other." "I don't need support," huffed the cedar. "We were just fine all of this time. We don't need this twisted thing around here." The twisted tree could hear the other trees, but could not talk as the others did. It didn't want the other trees to be afraid of it, so it found other ways to show love for them. In the spring, the twisted tree sprouted hundreds of tiny purple flowers. From top to bottom, the twisted tree and the two trees on either side were covered in a blanket of purple. Cedar cried out, "This is terrible! This is terrible! People will come to gather the flowers and they're gonna cut us down." "Nonsense," said the pine. "People will just come and they'll sit under the purple flower tree. Oh, they'll take special care of us because we bring them so much happiness." Well, as it happened, a man saw the flowering twisted tree and he built a bench around the trunk where people could come and sit. Artists painted pictures of the tree and children danced around the three trees. "Yeah, well, what if the twisted tree falls?" the cedar demanded. "It's going to drag us down." The pine laughed when it shook. "All your worrying is going to fell you before anything else has the chance," Pine said. As it happened, there was a terrible storm, and both cedar and pine were badly damaged by the wind. The twisted tree, though, it was like a spring, able to bend and rock with the wind. It could see that its neighbors were in danger, and it held on as tight to them as it could to save them. Instead of falling, It held the other two trees in place while they healed. As time passed and the flowers faded away, the twisted tree sprouted hundreds of long, fuzzy green, velvety pods. The pods fell all around the garden. Birds, squirrels, and even the wind carried many of the pods away to other gardens where they could grow. People who liked the purple flowers gathered the pods to plant them in their own gardens. Those that stayed behind began to sprout little twisted vines of their own. The twisted tree had given everything it had to the earth. It was very tired, but very proud of its gift. "This is terrible," cried the cedar. "Twisted trees are gonna take over the earth. We will be surrounded." The pine shook a branch at its old friend. "You have not learned very much over the years, have you, my friend?" the pine said. "Now all the trees in the garden of the earth will have the love and support we've enjoyed all of these years. And every spring, the earth will be covered in fresh purple flowers. It will all be beautiful." And so it was. Let's see. I think I have one more. It's my very favorite. It's the one that this book cover was made for. And it's called Chandra's Change. This story was written for my oldest son, Zoltan, when we moved off of our sailboat and he went to school. And there was a bully on the school bus, and he came home and he was crying. But it wasn't because the bully was bullying him. It was because the bully had bullied someone else and he hadn't done anything to stop it. So I wrote this story for him. Looking down at the branches of the tree, one could see many shades and colors. What could not be seen was the chameleon, perched on the branch and sitting perfectly still. I will blend, she thought. In her mind, she repeated, "One with the branch, one with the tree, sit very still, they won't see me." So it was that Chandra, the chameleon, spent her days and nights. When she did move, it was always a calculated risk. Her movements were slow and deliberate. One long toe at a time would uncurl from the branch, and then she would flow to the next spot on the tree and freeze. To blend in with the tree meant safety to Chandra. Being different or standing out, well, that could mean death. A bird or a snake or other animal could spot her too easily and consume her, so her colors changed. To a chameleon, it was imperative to feel oneness with the surroundings. She had not only to think of the color green, but to imagine how green must feel in order to assume its hue. Green. Green is alive, she thought. Green is unripe, new, fresh, honest. Honest is green. And so she would be green. Yellow. Yellow, she thought. Yellow, yellow, yellow is joy. Bright, sunny, warm. Warm is yellow. And she would become yellow. And moment to moment, Chandra would move and freeze and change to fit her tree. It was an oppressive afternoon in the rainforest where her tree grew. The leaves of the canopy were still, for they lacked the breeze to stir them. Birds called. Moisture dripped to the ground. Chandra peered from her branch. One eye looked up, the other one down. But it all happened so quickly that later she'd be tempted to believe that she'd imagined what had happened. 2 apes, swinging from vine to vine, landed right in front of her. One was in a terrible state. She was puffing and shrieking, and the larger, a male, was coiled to strike and attack. Chandra recognized him as Tarak, king of the apes. "Oh, please spare me," the lady ape begged. "Let me go." But Tarak beat her with a stout branch he held. "I do what I please, little Miss Nan. You have criticized my leadership long enough. Now you will learn a lesson. If you ever speak against me again, I will beat you till you speak no more." When he was through, he swung away, leaving Miss Nan behind. Chandra could hear her crying, but did not move. After all, well, what could she do to help? If she moved, well, she might be eaten. Did apes eat chameleons? Okay, well, it's better safe than sorry, okay? By and by, Miss Nan stopped her crying and began to lick her wounds. Oh, I'm sorry that you had to witness that, she said in Chandra's general direction. I should not have begged for mercy from such as him. Chandra slowly moved her eye to try and see to whom the ape was speaking, but she saw no one. I'm speaking to you, chameleon, she said. Yeah, I see you. That's my problem. I see too much sometimes, and then I speak out about it. When Chandra did not move or respond, the ape said, Don't be afraid. I will not harm you. You should not do things to anger others. Chandra was very surprised to hear herself say, you should stay very still, as I do, and you should just stay silent. Mm-hmm. The ape looked at Chandra for a long, measuring moment. Perhaps what you say is true, she said, but I saw that ape doing harm to others. He takes advantage of the weak and the poor and the elderly. His cruelty is legend. To remain silent would have made me feel a party to his actions, and that's just not my nature. Chandra was confused. Did not your people say, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil? You should close your eyes and cover your ears and just stay silent. That's a prudent thing to do. In spite of her wounds, Nan laughed. Well, a fine picture I'd make sitting around like that. Well, your speaking up did not help anyone, Chandra argued. All it did was, just bring you pain. The ape sighed. Well, there's truth in what you say. Unfortunately, I can't do as you do. I must return to my fellows and do my best to stop the evil one in any small way that I'm able. I will return to free his slaves and tend to the sick. Come with me, she urged. I need someone who can blend in as you do. Watch my back. You could sit and watch for him coming, and you could warn me. For the first time in her life, Chandra was in a quandary over what to do. She desperately wanted to follow Miss Nan and see that she remained well. Of course, Chandra was terribly afraid and unsure. Well, your cause is just, Chandra said. I'm only a tiny creature, and I couldn't be a very big help. Nan smiled. It's the size of the ideals, not the being, that makes one great, she said. Come and ride on my back. With the quickest motions she'd ever made, Chandra leaped onto Nan's back, and she thought deep brown thoughts. To Chandra, the ride on Nan's back as she swung from tree to tree was the most thrilling of her young life. And then they landed in the big tree of exile, and she felt a deep and abiding sadness. All around were refugees from the evil king's trees. Tiny faces of little ones, their eyes dark with fear, peered from behind their mothers. Elders, battered and tired, hunkered into corners. All the young male apes were absent, conscripts to the king's guard. Miss Nan worked quickly. She bandaged some, rocked and consoled others. Mostly she talked. She told them of staying together and not losing hope. She promised them a better life. She prepared them to flee to freedom. But Chandra had not forgotten her job, and when she saw the shadow of the king swinging toward the tree, she warned Nan by tugging hard on her fur. Nan grabbed a sharp stick, and she began to fight against Tarak. Chandra tried to close her eyes and think brown, 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 but it was no use. She looked up at Tarak, and she turned white with fear. Well, one moment, Tarak was fighting this meddlesome little female ape, and the next, he saw a vision. A white creature had reared up on Nan's head. It was terrible to behold. Some sort of white spirit seemed to spring from Nan's head, and Tarak fell back. No, he cried. Spare me, O spirit. Nan paused in mid-strike. Had he gone mad? Then she watched in horror as he grabbed a small child and held a sharp stick to its head. Go back from whence you came, and I will sacrifice this child, he chattered. It was at that moment that something inside Chandra seemed to shift and change. She became furious. She saw red. She felt hot with indignation. Her soul burned for justice. To Tarak's great and everlasting shock, the creature shifted its appearance. It became red and it seemed to grow. Its mouth opened and a long tongue of flame shot out towards him. "Release that child," Chandra shouted. "Release him and be gone, you beast." Tarak's eyes went wide and unfocused with absolute terror. "Dragon!" he wailed. "A tree dragon! Save me!" "I said, be gone," Chandra cried, and she shot out her long tongue at him again. By now, Miss Nan had recovered her wits enough to realize who the dragon was. It was all she could do, not to cry with relief or to laugh with joy. Her frightened little friend, always so careful not to make a wrong move, was saving all of their lives with her righteous rage. Tarak dropped his weapon and fled the tree, and he was never heard from again. And to this day, mothers tell their children of Chandra, the great tree dragon. They tell of the day when one tiny creature changed herself and the world around her, all for the better. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. Come back again tomorrow. Love you all.